They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. They called it the Whispering Green, but nobody said its name out loud after dark. Marla had grown up on the edge of that forest, in the forgotten village of Dravan Hollow. Every house faced away from the treeline. No one went in, no one asked why, they just didn't. But Marla wasn't like the others. She remembered when her brother Tomas vanished. One summer morning, when they were just kids, he told her he was going to follow the deer trails into the woods. He never came back. The villagers said the forest took him, same as it had taken dozens before, and they told her what they always told everyone. The forest is cursed, don't go in. But no one ever said what kind of curse, no one ever said why. Now, 17 years later, Marla stood at the edge of that same forest. The sky above was bruised with clouds, and a low wind rolled over the trees like breath. The dense canopy before her looked almost solid, like something grown not from nature, but from nightmares. She took a step forward. The air changed immediately. The smell of moss and loam was sharp, but beneath it was something else, sweet, metallic, like blood blooming on a rusted blade. The deeper she walked, the quieter it became. The birds stopped. The insects stopped. Even her footsteps began to muffle, swallowed by the moss-thick ground. She followed no path, there weren't any. It was as though the forest rearranged itself behind her, branches twisting into new shapes when she wasn't looking. After an hour, she heard it. A whisper, her name. Not shouted, not called. Breathed, right beside her ear. She turned, nothing there. Another voice followed, then another, all whispering her name, Marla, Marla, Marla. She broke into a run. Branches tore at her clothes. Faces flickered in the trees, faces she recognized. Tomas, her mother, her dead grandmother, all of them, staring with eyes too wide, mouths open too far. The forest wasn't cursed. It was alive. And it was hungry. She stumbled into a clearing and collapsed. There, in the middle of the glade, was a tree, twisted and gnarled like a hand reaching up from the grave. Its trunk was smooth like flesh, and from its bark sprouted dozens, no, hundreds, of faces. Some sleeping, some silently screaming, some weeping. All human. She saw Tomas among them. He looked at her. Marla, he whispered through bark-cracked lips, don't run, don't fight, it'll hurt more if you do. She backed away, trembling, heart thundering. The ground pulsed beneath her feet. Roots burst from the soil, coiling around her ankles like serpents. The tree opened, a vertical maw filled with vines and teeth. She screamed. No one heard. No one ever heard. A week later, a child from the village saw a new face in the tree when he dared peek into the forest's edge. It was Marla. Her eyes were still moving. And the forest whispered her name for days. They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 2. The villagers knew. They always knew. Not the details, not the truth spelled out in words, but something deeper. An old, bone-deep fear passed through generations like a blood memory. They didn't speak of the forest not because they were ignorant, but because they were afraid that speaking would wake it. That it would listen. And now, something had changed. The night after Marla vanished, the village dogs began to howl, not at the moon, but at the forest itself. The trees had grown closer. The villagers didn't need to measure it to know. The tree line had shifted. It had taken her, and it was still hungry. Inside, Marla did not die, not completely. She was bound, not just to the tree, but to the forest itself. She could feel everything, the footsteps of creatures on the moss, the insects crawling under bark, the worms chewing through roots. And she felt the other souls, the ones who had come before, whispering, crying, screaming in endless silence. Her mouth could no longer form words, but her mind could still scream. For now. But in the dark below the roots, something stirred. Marla was not like the others. She fought, not just in body, but in will. The forest fed on fear, on pain, on memory, but it had taken too much from her, and in its hunger, it had made a mistake. It had let her feel too much. She could feel its heart, a pulsing knot of life buried deep beneath the glade, and she could feel that it was old, but not eternal. It had a beginning. It could have an end. And somewhere in the dark of that dreaming green, something listened to her defiance. A whisper, unlike the others, coiled through her thoughts. "We are not all its children," it said. "Some of us were trapped like you, forgotten like you. Fight." The next day, a drifter entered the village, mud-streaked and hollow-eyed. He had no name, only scars and an old iron axe. He asked only one question. Did someone enter the Whispering Green? The villagers told him yes. A girl, Marla. He nodded once. Then he walked into the trees. The forest shuddered. Deep in the roots, Marla's eyes opened wide. The axe, she remembered it. Her grandfather's. Forged from cold iron, old iron, iron that burned the forest's flesh. It had come back. Hope had come back. And the forest, for the first time in centuries, felt fear. To be continued. Next part, the axe that burns through dreams. Would you like the next part? The forest is sleeping, but something beneath it has started to breathe. Part 2, what rises beneath the bones of the first hunger? The green sprout beneath the forest floor did not grow toward the sun. It grew downward. Through ash. Through bone. Through the rotted, bleeding remnants of the root. And then it split into two, like fingers. Searching. Digging. Calling. Marla stood at the edge of the clearing where the root had once risen like a living monument to everything the forest had stolen. Nothing grew here anymore. It was dead ground, or it should have been. But her breath turned cold when she stepped on the soil. And when she pressed her fingers into the dirt, it felt soft. Breathing. Silas joined her, axe slung across his back, eyes wary. "It's too soon," he said. "It shouldn't be waking." Marla shook her head. "This isn't the same thing." Silas frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, her pupils thin as slits, gold still glimmering in her eyes from the power she had absorbed. "I think it's not the forest," she said. "I think something under the forest has started to move." That night, in a town far to the north, a temple sank into the ground. No earthquake. No explosion. It was simply there one moment, then gone, as though swallowed. And in the crater left behind, they found a tunnel, carved with symbols none could read. Symbols that pulsed if touched. In the silence of the tunnel, one word echoed. Return. Back in Drevan Hollow, Marla sat in the dark, staring at the bark tooth she had unearthed. It moved. Not like a twitch, not like a thing alive. It shifted its shape when she wasn't watching. By morning, it had become a key. Silas dreamed again. But this time, the stone spoke. "You killed what grew above. But now you've opened what sleeps below. Roots die, but what has no name cannot rot." He woke with blood in his ears. At the forest's edge, a new tree had grown overnight. It was tall, bone-white, and every branch pointed downward. And when Marla touched it, the earth split open. A voice crawled up from the dark. The forest was only the beginning. To be continued. Next part, beneath the forest. There were doors. Want the next part? The forest is sleeping, but something beneath it has started to breathe. Part 3, beneath the forest. There were doors. When the ground split, it didn't crack or crumble. It peeled, like skin. The white tree stood over the fissure like a sentinel, its downturned branches twitching in the windless air. From beneath the forest floor rose a choking scent of old stone, blood-drenched lichen, and memory. Marla stared down into the darkness. The key in her hand pulsed, warm, eager. Silas put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't," he whispered. She didn't answer. She was already stepping down. The stairs were older than the forest itself, hewn from black stone, each one carved with a language that changed the longer she looked at it. It wasn't dead writing. It was breathing. Silas followed, his axe humming in his hands. The deeper they went, the more the forest above faded. No roots reached here, no life, no echoes. Only doors. 3 of them. Each carved from different material. The first, wood, blackened and cracked, bound in veins that still twitched. The second, bone, bleached smooth and humming like a lullaby sung by teeth. The third, stone, marked with 7 symbols that bled when looked at too long. Marla didn't hesitate. She walked to the bone door. The key turned before she touched the lock. Inside was nothing. An endless cavern of pitch-black void that swallowed torchlight like a throat. But in the center floated a seed, massive, obsidian, veined with molten green. It turned slowly in the air, pulsing like a heart. Around it drifted figures, humanoid, faceless, their skin like wood, but their arms too long, their mouths open but silent. And then the seed saw her. It stopped pulsing. The cavern shook. And a voice, not whispering, not speaking, but pressing, filled her skull like thunder poured through bone. We were sealed by the first hunger's birth. Now that it is gone, we awaken. We are the second root. The ones beneath the wild, beneath thought. You broke the forest, Marla. Now you must decide if you will replace it. Behind her, Silas gripped his axe tighter. You're not listening to it, he said. Tell me you're not listening. But Marla wasn't answering. Because deep inside her chest, something agreed. The forest above had been cruel, yes. But this was primordial. This was orderless growth, undeath without hunger. And it wasn't offering power. It was offering purpose. Back in Drevan Hollow, the villagers awoke to find fungus blooming from the cracks in their walls. Not green, not brown, but black, shimmering, and pulsing with slow breath. And the white tree? It was gone. To be continued. Next part, the root crown and the bloom that grows in darkness. Ready for the next? They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 3, The Axe That Burns Through Dreams. The forest remembered him. The man with the iron axe had walked its edges long ago. A boy back then, barely escaped with half a soul and a single eye. The forest tried to take him, but something inside him resisted. Something ancient, older than the trees. Now he had returned. The axe he carried gleamed dully, but the forest screamed at its presence. Cold iron was poison, not to its body, but to its mind. Iron disrupted its whispers, burned through its illusions, silenced its song. The trees bent away from his path. The roots curled like worms exposed to salt. Faces in the bark shrank back as he passed. But Marla could feel him coming. Each step he took lit up through the root system like fire spreading through dry veins. She sent her will out, weak, fading, but determined. Here, I'm here. She didn't know if he heard her. But the forest did. It struck back. Illusions bloomed like flowers from the ground. He saw Marla, sobbing, wounded, begging him to turn back. Then he saw himself, as a child, running from the forest with his father's severed hand in his arms. Then he saw the axe melt, drip like candle wax, useless. But the man knew better. The axe was real. The pain was real. The forest was the lie. He whispered a name as he walked, his mother's name, his brother's, the names of everyone the forest had ever stolen from him. Every name gave the axe more weight, more purpose. Beneath the cursed tree, Marla felt the ground begin to split. Cracks of cold light cut through the roots around her. She could feel the other trapped souls stir, like prisoners hearing a key in a lock after 1,000 years. And then she heard footsteps. Real ones. The man stepped into the clearing. The cursed tree shrieked. Its bark writhed, faces melted and reformed. The ground buckled. Vines shot toward him, sharp as spears, but the iron axe sang as it swung. With each strike, the forest howled in pain. Black sap sprayed like blood. He drove the axe deep into the tree's heart. Once. Twice. A third time. The tree screamed. And Marla's body, buried in its bark, was released, flung free like a broken tooth from a rotten jaw. She hit the moss with a gasp, lungs filling with air again for the first time in what felt like forever. The faces in the tree began to fade, one by one, their souls slipping free like smoke. The forest was coming undone. The man knelt beside her. You called, he said. I came. She looked into his eyes and remembered. A boy who used to watch the trees. A boy the village forgot. Silas? She whispered. He nodded once. Then the clearing exploded in green fire. The forest will not die quietly. Its heart has been wounded, but not destroyed. Marla and Silas now carry something inside them, something the forest left behind. A seed of darkness and a question. What if it wakes again? To be continued. Next part, the seed beneath her skin. Would you like to continue? They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 4, the seed beneath her skin. The forest fell silent. No wind, no whispers, not even the groan of trees shifting, just a suffocating stillness as if the entire woods were holding its breath. Silas helped Marla to her feet. Her legs trembled, skin pale and slick with sap. Her eyes were haunted, but alive. Not many ever came out of the forest. Fewer still came out whole. Marla wasn't sure she was one of them. "It's not over," she murmured, one hand pressed to her chest. "I can still hear it. It's inside me." Silas nodded grimly. He had seen it before. "The tree marks what it can't consume," he said. "If it can't take your soul, it plants something else." Marla touched her arm and felt a bump beneath the skin. Subtle, soft, like a splinter that moved when she pressed it. Her breath hitched. "It's growing." They burned the clearing that night. Silas doused the tree's remains in oil and iron filings. The flame didn't burn orange, it burned blue, and the smoke curled with shapes of screaming mouths. Marla watched with wide, unblinking eyes. Her body stood still, but her mind felt like it was sinking into soil again. The fire died by dawn. And the forest watched. Not with eyes, but with the memory of having eyes. Even wounded, even weakened, it remembered every soul it had swallowed. It still hungered. And now it had something new, a seed inside a survivor. Back in the village, people came to the road as Marla and Silas returned. No one spoke at first. They just stared, stunned. The forest hadn't let anyone return in decades. The oldest of the elders stepped forward. Her name was Mela. She wore black moss around her neck as a ward, but even she stepped back when she saw Marla's eyes. "They say it takes what it wants," Mela said softly, "but it left something in you, didn't it?" Marla gave a slow nod. Mela glanced at Silas. "You brought her back, but she may yet bring it back with her." That night, Marla couldn't sleep. She dreamed of roots beneath her skin, twisting through her veins, of whispering voices curling out of her mouth while she slept, of a tree growing from her shadow when she stood in sunlight. And when she woke, her fingernails were rimmed with green. Silas didn't sleep either. He watched the tree lean from the roof of the inn, axe beside him. He knew the signs. The curse didn't just live in the forest anymore. It had followed them out. There's a story they tell now in Draven Hollow. About the girl who came back, and the man who brought fire into the trees. But what they don't say, what they fear to say, is that the forest doesn't have to grow in soil anymore. It can grow in skin. And somewhere, deep inside Marla, the seed begins to open its first leaf. To be continued. Next part, when she dreams, the forest grows. Want the next chapter? The forest is sleeping, but something beneath it has started to breathe. Part 4, the root crown and the bloom that grows in darkness. In the chamber beyond the bone door, Marla stood before the floating seed. It pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Each throb sent waves of thought crashing through her skull, images, urges, ancient meanings with no human shape. The silent figures circled her like moons. Their arms hung like vines, and from the holes where faces should be, flowers bloomed, black-petaled, wet, breathing. One stepped forward and held out something. A crown, twisted from root and bone, still wet with sap. Not forged, not carved. Grown. Silas stepped between her and the figure. "No," he said. His voice echoed like steel in that place. The floating seed recoiled slightly. The crown withered in the figure's hands. Silas raised his axe. "I've seen what happens when you wear what grows in darkness." But Marla didn't move. She wasn't hypnotized. She wasn't possessed. She was choosing. "The forest we destroyed," she said slowly, "was feeding on memory, on pain. But this doesn't feed. It becomes." Silas stared at her. "You want to wear it?" "I think I already have." Back on the surface, Draven Hollow began to change. The fungus that bloomed in the village homes had become structures overnight, spiraled towers, living fences, twisting shapes that pulsed with heat and muttered softly to those who stood too near. Some villagers fled. Others stayed. A few were caught smiling, their eyes milk-white. their hands buried wrist-deep in the soil. When asked why, they whispered, "Something is blooming beneath us. It remembers the old world. And it's hungry, but only for a name." Below, the seed began to crack. Not violently. Beautifully. Petals of black obsidian split open like jaws unfolding, revealing a heart of gold root light, glowing in layered spirals, beating like a second sun. From its depths came the voice again. "The first hunger ruled the green. But we ruled before green had a name. The crown is not for kings, it is for gardens. You may return above, but you will never be the same. You will bloom in all directions." Silas turned to Marla. "If you take this, I don't know if you'll still be you." She looked at him, calm, hollow-eyed. "I don't want to be what I was before," she said. "I want to be what comes after." Then she stepped forward and wore the root crown. The cavern erupted in growth. Light, sound, roots, petals, words never spoken by human tongues filled the void. Silas screamed as the floor split and hurled him back up toward the surface like a seed shot from a pod. He landed in the ashes of the old cursed tree. Around him, the world trembled. Marla emerged the next morning. Crowned. Rooted. Changed. And when she walked into the village, the trees bowed. To be continued. Next part, the queen of what grows where nothing should. Would you like the next part? The forest is sleeping, but something beneath it has started to breathe. Part 5, the queen of what grows where nothing should. Marla did not return. She arrived. Her footsteps bent the grass, not downward, but away, like the land itself recoiled, confused between worship and fear. Behind her, a trail of new life bloomed, twisted, beautiful, impossible. Mushrooms in the shape of eyes. Trees that bled honey from their bark. Insects that whispered in spirals, not sound. Roots that refused to stay buried. The root crown shimmered atop her head, pulsing faintly with each breath she took. It didn't rest on her. It grew from her. Silas was the first to speak. He stood at the edge of the village square, axe in hand, not raised, not lowered. Just trembling. "You're not her," he said quietly. Marla turned to him. "I am," she answered, "but I am also what she became when the forest tried to take me, and I said no." The villagers gathered, hesitant, awed. The ones who had fled, they began to return, as if something pulled them, as if roots reached across miles and called them home. The village changed. Not violently, not all at once. It started with the air. It smelled cleaner, brighter, then sweeter, then wrong, too sweet, like fruit that had grown without sunlight. Then the buildings changed. Stone softened, wood hardened, thatched roofs became leafed canopies overnight, alive and whispering in the wind. No one built anymore. Things simply grew where they were needed. And in the center of it all, Marla stood each dawn, hands pressed to the earth, and listened. But not everything was peace. Because when one queen rises, so do the others. Far beyond the valley, in the forgotten ruins of the Temple of Hollow Vows, a figure in white bark stirred from stone sleep. It had no eyes. It wore no crown. But it smelled Marla's blooming kingdom on the wind, and in the voice of rotting leaves, it murmured, "Another has taken root. And now the garden must be pruned. Before she grows where nothing should grow. Before she remembers what she truly is." Silas watched it all unfold. He stayed, not out of hope. Out of loyalty, out of fear. And out of one final duty. If the thing wearing Marla's crown ever forgot who she had once been, he would be the axe that cut her down. To be continued. Next part, The Garden War, When Roots Wake the Dead. Would you like the next part? They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 5, When She Dreams, The Forest Grows. Marla didn't sleep anymore. She dreamed. And when she did, the forest listened. The dreams came like waves, lush, green, and suffocating. She stood beneath towering trees, vines coiled around her limbs like veins, and mouths bloomed from the bark, whispering her name backwards. The worst part? She didn't want to wake up. In the dream, the pain faded, the guilt about Tomas disappeared, the fear of the seed growing inside her melted into belonging. She didn't feel haunted, she felt chosen. And outside her dream, in the waking world, things began to grow. The first sign came in the inn. Silas found a small patch of moss under Marla's bed. Not normal moss, this was black, pulsing, and warm to the touch. He scraped it up with his axe and salted the floorboards. But the next morning it had doubled in size. The second sign was the animals. Birds stopped singing. The village cats hissed at Marla when she passed, eyes wide and glowing faintly green. The third sign came when little Diran went missing. They found him 3 days later, standing at the edge of the forest, eyes unfocused, speaking in an ancient tongue. Marla didn't remember teaching him those words, but they rang in her ears like old lullabies. Silas made his choice that night. "We have to leave," he told her. "Now, before the forest uses you to open itself here." Marla looked at him, pale and shaking. "You don't understand. I am the opening." She held out her hand. Tiny buds bloomed from her skin. Her veins had darkened to green. Beneath her collarbone, a faint outline of roots had begun to spread. "I can hear it," she said, "all the time now. In my blood. In the walls. It's not trying to take me anymore. Silas." Her eyes shimmered with tears and a strange, terrible beauty. "It's welcoming me home." Silas had faced horrors before. He had lost his family, his sight, half his soul. But this was worse. This was love twisted. He couldn't kill her. Not yet. Not when there was still something human left in her voice. But the forest had made her its bridge, its sea-bearer. He had one option left. That night, as Marla slept in the inn, Silas lit a ring of iron shavings and salt around her bed. He whispered a hunter's binding spell passed down through generations. And then he set off alone into the forest again, this time not to cut, but to dig. He would find the true heart of it. The original tree. The source. And he would end this thing at the root. Back in the inn, Marla twitched in her sleep. And in the dream, she stood at the base of a great tree of bones, taller than mountains, pulsing with green fire. She smiled. And the forest smiled back. To be continued. Next part, the root that sleeps beneath all forests. Ready for the next part? They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 6, the root that sleeps beneath all forests. The deeper Silas went, the more the forest changed. The trees leaned inward, forming walls of bark and shadow. Leaves no longer rustled, they watched. Every branch above was thick with memory, soaked in the weight of centuries. His breath fogged the air, though it wasn't cold. This place wasn't alive, it was aware. And beneath it all, he felt the pull of something ancient. Not just roots, not just rot. A will. He followed the path Marla once walked, but now it was clear. Like the forest wanted him to come. It showed him things, glimpses in the corner of his vision. A boy carrying an axe through the rain. A girl bleeding roots from her palms. A man with no face offering a crown made of antlers. He ignored them. He had one goal, find the root. The villagers only whispered about it, calling it the first hunger, a being that predated language and light. They said it was buried when the sky was still new. A root so deep and wide that all forests grew from it, and all wildness bowed to its name. The cursed forest wasn't its home. It was its mouth. At the center of the woods, Silas found a hill of bones. Not animal bones, human ones, piled high, stripped clean. They spiraled around an ancient stone altar overgrown with black ivy and riddled with runes that bled when touched. In the center was a hole, just wide enough to crawl through. It reeked of soil, iron, and grief. He lit a torch, tightened the grip on his axe, and descended. Meanwhile, Marla was waking up back in the village, and everything hurt. Her skin itched from within. She scratched at her arms and pulled away flakes of bark. Green light pulsed from her fingertips. The villagers fled when they saw her. And the forest whispered, not from without, but from inside her skull. "He's going to kill me," it said sweetly. "You're axe-bearer. He seeks my root. He'll strike it. And it will bleed, and you will die with me." Marla screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of confusion. Because part of her wanted Silas to succeed. And another part wanted him to fail. Beneath the ground, Silas crawled until the earth opened into a hollow chamber. There, nestled like a heart inside ribs of stone, was a massive root, thick as a house, pulsing with green sap and veins like glowing vines. Faces were growing from it, familiar ones. His mother. His brother. Tomas. Even his own. They all whispered in unison. We are the root. Strike, and we will die. Strike, and she will die. Strike, and you will be alone again. His hand trembled on the axe. He remembered Marla laughing beside a river as kids, her promise to find Tomas, her eyes last night, glowing with sorrow and something else. Was there still a way to save her? Was it already too late? The root pulsed. He raised the axe. To be continued. Next part, if the root bleeds, the world changes. Would you like to continue? They told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Part 7, if the root bleeds, the world changes. Silas stood beneath the world, surrounded by bones and whispers. The root throbbed before him like a living wound, pulsing green light across the chamber. He could hear Marla's voice in the air, not speaking, but breathing, panicked, conflicted, fading. The axe in his hand felt heavier than ever, not with weight, but with choice. Strike, and she dies. Spare us, and you live. The forest whispered with the voices of everyone he had ever loved. It begged, it bargained, it lied. But Silas had spent years in silence, hunting, surviving. He had learned one thing better than any other. The forest always lies, but its blood never does. He swung. The blade cleaved into the root with a scream like splitting mountains. Above ground, Marla collapsed. She clutched her chest as if her ribs were being pulled inward. Vines burst from her arms, her back, her mouth. Her scream cracked windows. Birds died mid-flight. But as the green fire surged through her, something happened that even the forest didn't expect. She didn't break. She held on. Inside her, the seed that had been planted by the forest cracked open, not into rot, but into resistance. Her will rose like flame against the invasion. The forest had underestimated what it had tried to devour. She wasn't soil. She was fire. Below, the root bled, thick, steaming sap gushed from the wound, turning to ash where it touched Silas's boots. The faces shrieked, melting into bark. The runes carved into the stone walls ignited one by one, glowing white instead of green. The forest panicked. It lashed out through its trees, ripping them from the ground, sending roots flailing through the village, knocking down homes, screaming through the wind in Marla's voice and 1,000 others. But something was unraveling now, something deep. Every soul trapped inside the root began to break free. Ghosts rose. Some wept, some laughed, some simply stood, silent at last. Tomas stood beside Marla's trembling form in the village square, his outline glowing like fireflies in fog. You did it, he said, you finally did it. Marla opened her eyes. They no longer glowed green, but gold, pulsing with her own life. The seed inside her? Dead. But something else had taken its place. Power, real, clean, hers. Beneath the forest, Silas sat in the darkness, the root broken and rotting before him. And he felt it. The silence. For the first time since he was a child, he heard nothing whispering his name. The cursed forest did not vanish. But it stopped growing. And it stopped taking. Marla now walks its edge, not as prey, but as warden. Silas stands beside her, axe always ready. Together, they keep watch. Because somewhere in the deepest dark, other forests still dream of waking. And not all roots are dead. The end, or the beginning of something far older. Would you like a sequel story set after this ending? Sequel 2, they told her the forest was cursed, but they never told her why no one who enters ever comes back. Title, The Forest is sleeping, but something beneath it has started to breathe. Part 1, The Deep Breath Beneath the Soil. It had been 3 years since Marla and Silas broke the root. 3 years of silence. The forest no longer whispered. No one vanished. No trees moved when no one looked. Children played near the edge now. Hunters took wood from fallen trees without fear. Birds returned. Flowers that had never grown before bloomed in fields once scorched by shadow. Marla had rebuilt her home facing toward the forest. But peace does not last forever, not when the curse is only cut, not killed. It began with a dream. Marla woke one night gasping, dirt in her mouth, her skin cold with dew. She was standing in her garden, barefoot, bleeding from her nose, her hands were covered in soil, and something was clutched in her palm. A tooth. Not human, not animal. It was long, curved, fused with bark. Still warm. She didn't remember digging. But she had. Her fingernails were cracked and full of black soil that didn't belong to this forest. Elsewhere, far beyond Draven Hollow, something ancient stirred in a forgotten cave. The deep root. It had slumbered while the first hunger fed and spread. Now, with the forest song silenced, it felt its sibling's death like the snapping of a 1,000-year-old bond. And it breathed in for the first time in eons. It did not whisper like the forest. It spoke in silence, a silence so complete it bent the bones of the world. Its thoughts reached across soil and root, searching. It found Marla. Not as prey, but as the one who killed its kin. And it smiled. In the village, Silas sharpened his axe. He hadn't dreamed since the root died, until now. His dream was not of trees. It was of stone, teeth, and something older than hunger. And in the forest, beneath the charred remains of the cursed tree, a single green sprout pushed through ash and bone. It pulsed once. Twice. Then stopped. Waiting. To be continued. Next part, what rises beneath the bones of the first hunger? Shall we continue the sequel?